Iran is warning that it hasn't really deployed even a significant fraction of its missile capabilities against Israel during those 12 days. But Israel and the United States, they are rearming. Even the United States is flirting with sending B-2 bombers to Israel in order to prepare it for the next phase of this conflict with Iran. So, Larry, your assessment of the situation, maybe your evaluation of the 12-day war and where things are now.
No, I viewed it as ultimately a victory for Iran because they survived the decapitation attempt. The whole uranium enrichment and Iran's supposed quest for a nuclear weapon, that's all just a distraction. That's a red herring. This has, I think, a lot more to do with eliminating the Islamic Republic and replacing it with a regime that's going to be pliant, obedient to the West. Particularly because Iran is in such a critical spot geographically and economically, now being part of BRICS, that candidly, it's a far more important member of BRICS than Brazil, South Africa, who were founding members of BRICS. And I think you could even make a case more important than India by virtue of Iran's natural gas, oil resources, and its location. But clearly, Israel took a beating with respect to the missiles. The fact that their censors clamped down so hard on the news reporting about what was actually hit. When you look at it, I always say compare what's happened between Russia and Ukraine over the last 3 years, 5 months. In that period, Russia's launched a lot of ballistic missiles, a lot of cruise missiles. They've dropped bombs. They've hit them with tens of thousands of drones. Well, Iran is 3 times the size of Ukraine, both in terms of landmass and in terms of population. And so when it comes to exchanging missiles back and forth, Iran shut down Ben Gurion Airport. Israel only has one international airport. There was no other way for civilians to get out. Whereas Iran had 29 international airports. And so Israel shut down 2 of them. Well, they still had 27 more that they could operate in. Similarly with ports, Israel only had the 2 ports at Ashdod and Haifa. Those were damaged and stopped operating while the war was underway because the insurance companies weren't letting ships go in there. So all of a sudden, Israel now has cut off from air legs of supply and cut off from sea routes of supply. Then the 2 refineries damaged. They were both at Haifa and Ashdod. So just on the economic standpoint, Israel was taking a far worse beating than Iran. I'm not saying Iran didn't suffer any damage, but Iran could have definitely kept this going, and it was an arranged exit. The United States, I don't know the particulars of who approached who and what deals were made, but the United States got to launch its show attack on the 3 nuclear processing facilities, and then Iran got to do its show at Al Udeid Air Force Base, but no mass deaths on either side. So I think Iran's now got to be prepared, though, that this isn't over. The West is coming back. Israel intends to, but Israel by itself does not have the capability. It needs the United States. And so from that standpoint, I can't rule out the possibility of a false flag.
There were some who were disappointed that Iran decided to take a ceasefire. But your assessment of the situation as you were evaluating it?
Well, I think Iran is in a difficult position, and I think the leader of any country is responsible for the people of his country. And you never know the direction a war can take. Iran was facing up against 2 nuclear powers. And so I think that when the opportunity came for Iran to stop hostilities, it took the opportunity. And I think that was wise. It's easy when you're sitting over here on the sidelines to say that somebody else who's faced off against a potential nuclear attack should keep going. But I think they did the wise thing. I think they did. And here's the other important thing. They demonstrated a level of morality and a level of responsibility in this conflict, so that people around the world look at them and will say, well, you said from the beginning, if you stop shooting at me, I'll stop shooting at you. And you continue to keep your word. So I think that they looked like Iran came out of it looking, number one, like they were quite able to defend themselves. And I think they came out looking like the adult in the room. And I think that was critical for Iran as far as how they deal with their allies and how the rest of the people perceive the Iran. And internally, they want to, I'll put it like this. Because something my dad used to always say, know how to take a win. When they stopped, they had inflicted significant pain upon the very foundational parts of Israel, their research and development, their military industrial, their military capabilities, their bases, their economic and technology. So they had inflicted pain upon their enemies. The U.S. had to kind of go in there and do a fake bombing to get out. All over the world, people were saying, wow, you guys really were able to, put a licking on Israel pretty good. The people in their country were kind of starting to circle the wagon, say, some of us may have been a little pissed off with the government. But you know what? I just saw a poll where now 77% of Iranians say they're proud of Iranians' missile and drone capabilities. So at that point, they had a win. It was smart. They took a win. Add to this, they knew at that point that they could, as the Chinese say, they have a really, a long spear, but a short shield, right? They knew that they could inflict pain, but they had some holes in their air defense system. So it gave them an opportunity to take a win at home, take a win abroad, inflict pain on their enemies, and to now have time to regroup, because they knew this it isn't just over, but they had an opportunity to regroup, to meet with some of their allies, to strengthen their air defense system, and maybe some other things that they need to even build more missiles to be able to defend themselves. So I think for numerous reasons, it was a very wise move by the Iranians. And I'll say this too, to go back after the Iranians, I think the U.S. has to do it, because Israel now is really a paper tiger. Their bases have been splatted. Their ability to refine fuel and the jet fuel and all the things they need is extremely hampered. They've got just so much damage right now. Their ability to even make some of the missiles and things that they need for some of their systems, the Rafale, their big and the Elbit systems, both of them were hit. So I think they were able to cripple Israel to a point where it will almost have to be the United States to come in and attack them, because Israel couldn't. I mean, if Israel started 10 more days, they took 12 days and they were flattened. 12 more days, and it's curtains for Israel, if it didn't already curtains for Israel. I think they were wise, and I think they really were very ably stood for themselves in this conflict.
God, given what Garland said and what Larry's been saying, maybe you could evaluate the military side of all of this, what transpired and how it ended up shaping up the way it did, because even just very early on in the back and forth, Operation True Promise 3, and of course Israel strikes, there were reports that Israel was running out of air defenses, and then we had the ceasefire after the 12th day. So your assessment of what happened there?
Well, when you're speaking about war, there's two things. One, go back to old Karl von Clausewitz, war is an extension of politics by other means. So, you got to look at what the political objective was, not just what the military action was. And then another one, just an old truism, no plan survives initial contact with the enemy. So no matter what both Israel, United States, and Iran were thinking a conflict would look like, it ended up looking like something totally different. When we go to war as an extension of politics by other means, the stated objective of Israel in attacking Iran, at least initially, was to destroy its capability to produce nuclear weapons. And that, of course, was the United States' stated objective. But Israel has since then acknowledged that this had a regime change component. Indeed, their surprise attack that they initiated on July 12th, the night of July 12th, targeted the senior leadership, especially the senior conservative leadership of Iran, to include Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader. The Israelis acknowledged they were trying to kill him. They struck some places they thought he wasn't there. And they continued to hunt him down and wasn't able to find them. Trump has bragged that, he knows where Khamenei is and we could kill him at any time, he bragged. Oh, why? Unless you had regime change as the goal and objective. And they failed. So that objective failed. So from a military standpoint, if the true objective of the Israelis was to collapse the regime, which it appears to be, you look at their decapitation strikes, and I just want to remind people that that's a copacetic way of saying murder, because this was a cowardly surprise attack, and I emphasize the term cowardly. That's perfidy, the very definition of perfidy. The United States was engaged in negotiations with Iran, good faith negotiations on the part of Iran, which would address the totality of Israel and America's, nuclear weapons related concerns. A treaty, not a fatwa anymore, but a treaty. And treaties, people understand, have verification mechanisms built into it. So this wasn't just we'll sign a treaty, trust us. This was, we'll sign a treaty and you have verification mechanisms in place to ensure that this treaty is accurate and complied with. Iran was ready to do this, to include, apparently, to allow U.S. inspectors on the ground in Iran. Very big deal. Very big deal. They'd been banned. U.S. inspectors weren't allowed to be part of the IAEA. And now Iran's saying, we understand there's a necessity to do this. Elimination of 60% enriched uranium, reduction of excess cascade enrichment capabilities. We could go on and on and on. Iran was doing this in good faith and preparing for a sixth and decisive round. And Israel said, yeah, we're on board with this. And then they launched their attack. This was an attack against men who were sleeping at home with their families. All right. This isn't hunting down the evil Iranian general who's out working, plotting to destroy the world. This is a man at home with his family sleeping when the Israelis struck, killing not just a number of these officers, but their families. Sometimes if they didn't have the specificity of the intelligence about which apartment building they lived in, they just dropped the building, dropped the entire building, killing everybody in it, including all the other innocent women and children that lived in that facility. So it was a cowardly act carried out by the Israelis. And it didn't work. So war is an extension of politics by other means. The political objective was regime change, and it didn't work. You saw the Israelis, after their attempt at regime change, try to put pressure on the Iranians, saying to the surviving moderate president, just let us finish the job of destroying your nuclear facilities, and then it will all be over. And Iran was like, nah, that ain't going to happen. And they retaliated. Now, for the Iranians, they had a plan in place. It's been in place since 2005, 2006. At least that's when it began, back when they were afraid that the United States was going to implement Wesley Clark's, statement that seven nations in 7 years. Then Iran was the seventh nation on that, and it looked like from the Iranian perspective, the United States was going to act. If people recall, in the month of March 2006, during the celebration of, I think it's Nowruz is the holiday. Iran shut the nation down, went into a war footing. Now the attack didn't come, but as part of their preparations, Iran divided their nation into 57 different military districts, each of which was prepared to carry out independent resistance for up to 2 years. That means that if decapitation took place, Iran doesn't collapse. The nation is designed to continue even if they don't have, instructions from Tehran. And Iran continued to dig in, reinforce a lot of these underground cities you see, the missile cities, etc., are put into a military district so that district can continue offensive operations against Israel or Western targets on its own volition. It doesn't need Tehran. So this system was in place. And then Israel hit. And, that plan went out the window. The Israeli regime plan went out the window. That didn't survive. The Iranian, resistance with massive missile strikes, taking out the totality of Israel, that didn't happen. Iran was hit hard. They lost air defense. We don't know how many of their missiles were hit, but we know that the Israelis were targeting missile storage facilities. Some of those things were burning pretty bright with, variations in flame intensity, implying that, things were burning there like rocket fuel motors. So Iran had to adjust, and they made the adjustment. Israel did something that nobody had predicted. Well, nobody, but I'm not going to take total credit. But if I remember I was talking with Professor Mirande right after the assassination of Haniyeh. Maybe it was on your show, Danny. And I said, they just used a drone to assassinate a senior Hamas official in Tehran on Inauguration Day. That means they can kill anybody they want to at any time. Do you understand? And I told them straight up that the attack that will take place against Iran will be a decapitation strike. It will begin with a decapitation strike. And Israel just told you how they're going to do it with these drones. And he's like, don't worry about it. We got that all under control. Well, you didn't have it under control. The Israelis used drones to carry out a decapitation strike, and you weren't ready for it. And when you uncovered it, you realized the Israelis, this isn't just one or two drones. They had entire drone factories. They had warehouses full of tens of thousands of drones all over the country, and they used them very effectively to take apart the Iranian air defense system. And so Iran now is dealing with a situation where they're trying to carry out a ballistic missile-based campaign against Israel, but they have to deal with the fact that Israeli aircraft and drones are able to penetrate Iran and start hunting these missiles down. That changes your strategy and your tactics as well. And then the final thing the Israelis were able to pull off was being able to fly from Syria into northern Iraq, dogleg up into Azerbaijan, come in and attack Tehran from the Caspian Sea. Iranian air defense wasn't ready for that. And the Israelis were able to do extreme harm to Iran, hitting them really hard. And so from the Iranian perspective, yes, they're pounding the Israelis. They got their act together. They were able to get the campaign up. They're gathering intelligence. They're hitting the targets that need to hurt. And Israel's getting hurt, but Iran's getting hurt too. And the Israelis had some tricks. They penetrated the Iranian secure communications facility. Were able to lure Iranian officials into known locations before hitting them with a bomb and killing or wounding a number of officers that way. So from the Iranian perspective, this is a war that's rapidly spinning out of control. Iran was not in control of this conflict. They were in control of the strikes against Israel, but they definitely weren't in control of what was going on inside Iran. And that's a dangerous situation. The Israelis, likewise, weren't in control. They could bomb Iran, but they were getting pounded. They weren't in control. Both sides were punch-drunk fighters, desperate for the fight to be called. And the fight has been called. So where are we now? I think Iran has the upper hand. One, because they retain the ability to strike Israel, and there's nothing the Israelis can do to prevent that. No amount of flying in ballistic missile defense systems is going to change the fact that Israel had all the ballistic missile defense systems it needed for those 12 days, and they couldn't stop the Iranians. But now, the Mossad's drone capabilities have been eviscerated. So they won't have that. Are they going to pull something else out of the bag? I don't know. It took them 10 years to put that one in there. That they lost a tremendous capability. That was supposed to be the Sunday punch, and it failed. The dog leg out of Azerbaijan, that's not going to work again. Iran has gone to China, and if the reports are right, they got 40 JS-10 fighters coming in. These are advanced fighters with advanced systems, with advanced radars, and you run a combat air patrol over the Caspian Sea, and anything comes in the Caspian Sea will be shot down. So the Israelis lose that. I imagine the Iranians will get their air defense system back up. If the Iranians are smart, and I believe they're some of the smartest people in the world, on day one, when they wake up and go, damn, the Israelis are taking out all of our radars, rather than doubling down and going, deploy everything, I think they went, withdraw everything. Preserve as much as we can until we figure out what the hell is going on here, because things are just blowing up. And so I think Iran will re-examine what needs to be done. You're not going to get that knockout punch again. And I think if there's a future conflict, Israel's going to get pounded into the dirt again. There's nothing they can do to stop that. And Israel's ability to hurt Iran will be severely curtailed.
Sure. I would just say this, that what was proven out of all of this is that the myth of Israeli invincibility was destroyed. And the myth of U.S. military power was also damaged. You know, we couldn't stop the Houthis. We launched this one raid on Iran, and then, you know, called it a day and took credit. You know, again, just as Trump said, "Hey, those Houthis capitulated." Man, those Iranians capitulated. But the fact is, Iran was not asking for the ceasefire; it was Israel. And you know, so I agree with Scott that you know, Iran did suffer some major damage, but it's a much bigger country, can absorb, just like a big guy can absorb more blows from a child than a child can from a big guy. And it's sort of the same principle.
Garland, your assessment then, you know, given all that we've talked about with regard to Israel-Iran, of course, U.S.-Israel's war of aggression on Iran, and the possibility, of course, of another phase, another round coming our way.
Well, a couple of things. I'll say this. We know that a lot of countries, Russia does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And with a lot of, particularly with Russia, who I think is, you know, they're an ally with Iran. It's not about whether Iran has a right to, which under, okay, sure, and whether they've been attacked and whether, okay, fair enough, right? You can make that argument. The issue that Russia has and that a lot of people have is this, and that's for the overall safety of the world, in that, you know, if they get one, that Saudi Arabia has the money and they're going to say, we got to have one. Of course, Turkey's got to have one. UAE is going to have, and what you're going to have is a really, really heavily nuclear armed Middle East, which is a problem. I know, yes, Israel has one. Well, we should be trying to go in the other direction, not forward. So I think a lot of countries are not just looking at whether Iran has the opportunity, should have the opportunity to defend themselves with a nuclear weapon. It's, man, if that happens, then, and you've got countries such as, here's one of the discussions, if there was a major war, some of these countries like UAE or Saudi Arabia potentially could fall, because you've got countries where 98% of the people on the streets are, agree with the Palestinians, but where the government kind of goes along with the West and helps defend missiles coming into Israel, etc. Which means in a major war, these countries, some of these countries could fall. There are a lot of people who have said, look, you know, who knows if these countries are even going to stand with what's going on in the Middle East. So what you could eventually have is countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, with missiles, and completely unstable governments, maybe, you know, ISIS type, who knows what. And now they get missiles. You just don't want these things to happen. So notwithstanding Iran's right to defend themselves, there are a lot of other factors that countries like Russia and major other countries are taking into account here, saying, how can we do this in a way that this nuclear proliferation thing doesn't, you know, get out of control? And I think that's a responsible way to look at it. But when I look at the attacks on, you know, one of the discussions when you talk about the Samson option, the U.S. doing something like using a nuke, the Straits of Hormuz closing down, right? And that is the U.S. empire. The question becomes, would the U.S. empire swallow a poison, you know, swallow a suicide pill, right? In a lot of these instances, there are things that can happen that would obliterate, to use one of Trump's favorite words, the entire Western economy. And at that point, you ain't really an empire anymore. I don't know what you are, but I always say this: the ruling elite's biggest fear is always internal uprising, a revolution, that the people will go so nuts that they'll go crazy and just start, you know, tearing the place apart, burning things down. In any event, that the United States, as pampered as U.S. people are, and they're angry right now that things aren't going so well economically. And if they wake up tomorrow and it's $13 a gallon for gas and hyperinflation, and you need a wheelbarrow full of dollars to buy a wheelbarrow just to carry your dollars, then this place is going to fall apart. So I think that there is certainly a concern amongst the people who run this country that we got to kind of step lightly, because do we really want to say we believe in this so much that we're willing to wipe out the entire Western economy? We'll lose power. We could be killed. Everything that this empire, all of this stuff that we are like, oh, this is great, could disappear. So I have a great question as to whether the U.S. will do something to swallow the suicide pill. Some people, oh, we'll nuke so-and-so, or we will, you know, attack Russia or whatever. I think the last thing they want to do is swallow a suicide pill. But then again, you never know. What I'll put it like this: if you're on the other end of that suicide pill, you can't really say for sure whether they will or not. The thing I think is this, and this is what keeps coming back to me when people say Israel is gearing up to attack Iran again. Israel really took some hard hits. And Israel, as we knew it, it's not the same Israel. If all of your bases have been hit really hard, if your refineries have been hit really hard, if the things that produces your missiles and tanks and all of that are splattered and you're trying to rebuild them in 12 days. So you're going to go back and you're going to say, well, this time we ain't going to have the jump on them. This time we ain't going to have 12 hours with no air defense system so we can smack them all. And this time they've had time to prepare for some of our tactics and some of the things we're doing. So we're going to go now and we're going to fight them toe to toe. So we're not going to have the same success. And we know they're going to open up on us from day one, maybe harder. So if we're kind of after 12 days saying a little bit of uncle, literally, Iran is 78 times bigger than Israel. So Israel can't go into an attrition war with somebody 78 times bigger than them. So what are they going to do? Another 12 days? They were almost destroyed in 12 days. So, okay, they're going to attack again. And in 12 days, 14 days, and not to mention that the damage done in 12 days would be exponential over the next. It wouldn't just be the same amount of damage 12 days. It would be like somebody like a boxer gets a cut. Somebody keeps hitting that cut. Why? Because they know it's going to get worse and worse and bleed so bad the person will have to go out, right? 12 more days will be 10 times more than the first 12 days. I'm not going to say they won't. They may. I don't know. I don't see how the hell Israel can do it. I think the U.S. would have to do it. And I don't know. I think Trump really got scared by some of the MAGA people freaking out. I think he really got scared by I think he really got scared by the potential for closing the Straits of Hormuz. There's a lot of people that want to. Will Trump make the decision to get another slice of that pie? I'm not sure he will. Or whoever's making the decision. I'm not sure they will go back down that road. Maybe they will. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure they will.
Would B-2 bombers to Israel make a difference?
B-2 bombers to Israel is an act of treason. It's insane. You have two insane U.S. congressmen talking about this. The B-2 bomber is a strategic weapon system, highly classified. The idea that we would give it to Israel is just ludicrous. I just want to remind people that, let's not forget about the USS Liberty, but that's not the worst of what Israel has done. Israel spies against us all the time, betrays us. People go ahead and look up the Lavi fighter, L-A-V-I. That was Israel's answer to the F-16. That they were going to produce their own fighter, but they borrowed extensively from the F-16 project. We provided this technology to them under the conditions that it stays in Israel. Lo and behold, a Lavi fighter ends up in China at a research and development facility being reverse engineered by the Chinese because Israel cut a secret deal with China. Israel sells us out all the time. Jonathan Pollard was a spy who was arrested in the 1980s. He gave to Israel the crown jewels of the American intelligence community. That is a book that contained all of the frequencies that we were intercepting, the codes that we had broken, the codes that we couldn't break, how long it took to break the codes, etc. Everything an enemy would need to know to make themselves secure from our signals intelligence. He gave that book to the Israelis. And then the Israelis sold it to the Russians in exchange for favorable immigration. The Israelis betray America 24/7. The CIA and the FBI have long said, and these are reports that are suppressed, that the number one espionage threat faced by the United States today is the Israeli government. They spy on us all the time. If you remember, there was a AIPAC, had the controversy back when I think Rubin and Franklin, two of the AIPAC people, were arrested and investigated for spying. They were passing classified information from the Pentagon through AIPAC to an Israeli consular official. They just spy. That's what they do. Barack Obama's White House was thoroughly penetrated by technical listening devices. Surrounding the White House, there are technical listening devices all over the place, installed by Israel, focusing on collecting information about the President of the United States, about National Command decision-making authority. Israel's our enemy. They're not our friends. And you want to give them B-2 bombers. Are you high? That B-2 bomber, that classified information pertaining to the B-2 bomber will be sold to our enemies before you know it, or our potential enemies, our potential adversaries, the people that we were building this bomber to respond to. So I just think this is an act of absurd propaganda, but it is also an act of treason, and it should be treated as such. These people should be investigated. Why are you trying to give away some of the most highly classified technology in the United States arsenal to Israel, knowing that Israel has a history of selling this information for its own good? Israel doesn't work for the benefit of the United States. Israel only works for the benefit of Israel.